Hi, everyone. Welcome to my conversation with Patrick. Now, yesterday we tried to get this conversation going, but we had a lot of technical difficulties. Tonight, I'm hoping I've got my fingers crossed. It's very stressful, but I'm trying desperately to bring someone who I just know you will absolutely love to hear from. He's someone who I've respected for many, many years, and many hairdressers around the world, and I said this yesterday, often say to me, Patrick, you are someone who inspires me. You are someone who I've looked up to, or perhaps you changed the direction of my life. Well, let me tell you, we all have someone that we like to look up to. We all have someone who we think has helped influence us as people and as creative hairdressers in a direction that perhaps we thought we may not have gone in if we hadn't have met them or seen them. So this gentleman is Andrew Collinge, and I think I have credited Andrew in more magazines almost than he's probably had hot dinners. No, that's probably not true. For being one of the key people who inspired me to look at the way that I presented on stage. So I've got everything crossed, my fingers, my toes. Randy's up there in the technical booth, and we're going to bring Andrew to screen. Andrew, please, let's have a little look to see if we can find you. Hello.
Hi, Patrick. Can you hear me?
Oh, Andrew, I can hear you beautifully. Yesterday, we didn't get this far because you just literally ran out. Now, to all of my viewers, he's got the sunset on him. I'm going to tell him, Andrew, where you are. He has the most... Now, don't touch your camera because honestly, he's got the most dynamic view of the world of the... Is it the Mersey or the... What is it? The estuary?
Well, it's the estuary. It's the D estuary, the Irish Sea. It's the Irish
That's
Sea.
right, the D estuary.
It's called Liverpool
Andrew,
Bay.
welcome. Welcome to my show. I'm so happy to have you on here.
Well, Patrick, thank you. And I'm sorry. I don't know if it was my fault last night, but look, you know what? It was. I'm so excited to be invited, and thank you. I'm really pleased you invited me, and really thank you for that very gracious introduction. But I'd like to think. I'm sure. I'm a huge fan of yours. Your work and the way you engage with the hairdressing world. But if in a little way I inspired you in the early days, and that makes me really happy.
Andrew, something else, that one of the things that I found interesting over the years, there is a real parallel to the way you and I work. And I really mean this. And I don't think I've ever said this to another living hairdresser, Andrew Collinge. I think there's a similarity in the way that we deal with hair. I think there is a fluidity in the way that you work with hair, that I work with hair. And whenever I see one of your beautiful photo shoots, whenever I see it, there's always a balance, there's always a finish in the hair that I myself would have achieved or obtained. And I find it just pure joy to look at your work, Andrew Collinge.
Well, that's very, very kind. I think a lot of it is in preparation. I think the preparation of the hair. I mean, I see you work. I love watching you at Salon International. It's such a shame. Well, there's so many serious things going on in the world that everyone, it's affecting everyone. But I do think Salon will come back, and the big hair shows will come back, and we'll get to see you again. The way you create these styles, but. I know the amount of effort you've put in before you've got on stage. Hair does not react like that without the preparation. No. And I think a lot of it's down to training. I was very fortunate. I trained with my father, but I also trained with Michael Razzer at Michael John. And again, and also I think it's keeping it quite simple. I think this is the secret, is not to overcomplicate, particularly when dressing hair up. I think it's the whole secret of dressing hair up is you're getting rid of the hair. So I think but to do that, you've got to have some skills and some techniques, but a lot of it is just practice and preparation.
It really is. And you're right. It's simplicity. And I'm always saying less is more. Whenever I'm judging hair and I'm looking hair around the world, it's always about paring it back. What is the story? What are you trying to tell me? Can I see that story clearly? And it always comes back to that beautiful preparation and that simplicity of presentation, which is something you are the master of as well.
Well, I think as I said, and I think it's balance. I think even when I'm doing haircuts or if I'm doing a photo shoot, I like the longevity. So, you know, I got, you know, there's some amazing, brilliant hairdressers in the world that you know, are so on trend, and they'll see fashion and do so. Maybe my work's a little bit more
no, Andrew, Andrew,
classic.
I think I think your work is timeless. I think when you present a collection or you present your work, there's always a very strong feeling of femininity, and also there's an art to getting it commercially right. There's an art to that, you know.
Yeah.
And yes, avant-garde is wonderful; it's a great release. But I think by the same token, the way that you present your commercial hair is timeless.
Well, I think it's trying to, you know, we obviously we're in business. I mean, that's ultimately it. And I think, you know, we want our brand or our the way we're perceived by our clients as a hairdresser. You know, that they'll come to one of our salons, or trainees will want to train with us because they'll see the longevity in the finished result.
You know, Andrew, I have to say, I mean, you touched very quickly on your training, but let's not forget your start. I mean, Peter Collinge, OBE, I might say, OBE, and please, Andrew, I'm terribly sorry. I know he passed this year in April, and I know he was a fantastic age at 92. But there he is. I mean, my God, look at this. What a photo. I mean, gosh, Andrew, you're so much like your dad, which is brilliant. But Peter Collinge, to those people out there that don't know the name Peter Collinge, because there's a lot of younger hairdressers out there, Peter was instrumental in hairdressing, particularly in the north, and particularly up around his passionate area of Liverpool and the northwest. And but he was an absolute name to be reckoned with. Well, obviously an OBE from the Queen. So Andrew, how did it feel having Peter Collinge as your father, as your role model?
Well, I remember very early on. I mean, obviously, growing up in a house, and this will resonate with hairdressers all over the world. You know, we live and breathe hairdressing, so we would talk hairdressing. And Dad was very practical. It was the days where people you didn't, you know, he would, a couple of the guys that worked with him, they'd be in the garage, and they literally. I always said Dad built the business. I mean, he literally built the business. I mean, they would build the units, the backwashes, they'd buy the basins. But, you know, the money was tight, and, you know, and he, you know, so he was very practical from that point of view. He was a brilliant competition hairdresser, and he competed with the likes of Vidal Sassoon. And it was when competition hair, I mean, here you can see doing, this was an exhibition we did in Liverpool for the Walker Art Gallery called Putting on the Glitz, and he did this beautiful finger waving. But him and Vidal were they were very the young sort of kids on the block. The competition hairdressing was very fantasy, and they did very, very simple hairstyles. And Dad only did it for a year or two, as did Vidal, and it was all in the early 50s and mid 50s. But I think that's the skills he learned.
And Andrew, what do you think he passed on to you? What's one of his biggest pieces of advice to you?
Well, I think it was this balance. It was keeping heads very neat and very sleek, and less is more, as you said. And he won a competition which was called a cocktail conversion. You had to convert a day style to an evening style.
Yeah.
And the day style was on my mother, actually. She was his model. It was a beautiful sort of, similar to the image you just saw, beautiful sort of waved, very chic little, very small head. And then for the evening look, he got a stencil, and he put a crescent of a moon and a few stars with a stencil and just sprayed it on. And no one had seen anything like it. And it was the confidence to do that. And he actually won. It was a European competition. And I think so. And he was also a great cutter. I mean, Vidal obviously revolutionized hairdressing as we know it. But Dad in the North was doing the same sort of thing. I mean, they were great friends. They were both members of the Fellowship for British Hairdressing. And when I was president of the Fellowship, Vidal was the patron of the Fellowship. And I invited him to come along, and he lived in LA then. And you know, it was more out of politeness to invite the patron to come to the President's Night dinner. This was back in the mid-90s. And he said yes. And when he arrived with Ronnie, his wife. And when he arrived, I said, "It was so good of you to come." He said, "I didn't come for you, I only came to see your father."
But I mean, Vidal was so gracious. I remember sitting with Vidal Sassoon, and Vidal he was with Ronnie, and he said to me, he said, Patrick, I really want you to come over and spend some time with me over in LA. You know, come over and visit. And I mean, he was such a generous person. I was a bit taken aback, and I said, oh no, Vidal, honestly, you've got so many people you need to spend time with. I'm probably the least that you should. But I felt as though the invitation was genuine, and he was like that. But your father was like that. I mean, I can remember your dad.
So he was very much. He was just a very successful businessman. He started the salons. My mother was very much influential. She was his model, but very much similar to the way Liz and I have been an item throughout my whole career, and we very much work as a team. She's worked as a makeup artist for me, and we so mum and dad were the same, and Vidal. My father started the salons. They're very stylish. They're very much the place to go to. It was during the mid-60s. It was the time of the Beatles in Liverpool. We were right in the heart of Liverpool. One of Dad's favourite regular clients was Mrs. Epstein, which was the manager of the Beatles, his son. So he was a pioneer. He launched the salons, and he very much got into hairdressing training. The Peter Collinge Study Centre, they used to exhibit down we went to the very first Salon International, which was in 1972 at the Royal Lancaster Hotel, just off in Hyde Park. And in fact, John Rainey of Denman, John, Denman Brushes, Denman, great British company, Denman. Dad was the first on-stage hairdresser at Denman at Salon International.
Wow. So, I mean, that's incredible. And I know, I mean, he had this huge pedigree. He had everything going for him in the North. You were his son. I mean, I know how proud your dad was of you. And Andrew, but your father said to you, come on, son, you have to go off to London. You've got to go and spread your wings a little bit. So he wasn't about keeping you in one space, was he? He allowed you to go away to experience life a little bit more.
Well, absolutely. I entered a hairdressing competition, and it was like a guild under 21 competition. And the prize, I got to the final with, I think I got in the top 3. So I got to the final. And one of there was Lawrence Falk was a judge, who was Crimpers, a salon called Crimpers. And
I remember.
And I don't think, but Michael wasn't a judge. But then a brilliantly talented hairdresser who worked for, who again has passed on, Debbie Cook. She was one of our key tutors. She won the very first Weller Vogue competition, which was judged by Michael Raza, John Isaacs of Michael John, and Joshua Galvin. And Debbie got to the final, and I wasn't there. I mean, I wasn't at the final. It was a great night, and I'd been thinking I wanted to, I'd done a year or 2 with Dad, but I'd seen London through getting to the final of the Guild competition. Realized I wanted to really make my own mark. It was, there was a lot of established names within.
And it was interesting because you started working with Robert Lebetta, I think it was, wasn't it? You were
Michael. I finished my apprenticeship at Michael John, so it is. I was fortunate. It was a very lucky break to get to Michael John. But yes, I was living in a hostel. I mean, the wages were very low as an apprentice hairdresser in London. I went and lived in this hostel in Gloucester Road. There wasn't really, there was nowhere to really hang out at night and all the rest. And Robert worked at Michael John with his wife, Kay. And he was doing those wonderful basket weave hairstyles.
I know.
Classic Robert Lebetta. And I would hang around and say, can I assist? And some of the hairstyles took 12 hours to make. And, so I used to assist Robert on those shoots. And so I learned I learned very much the sort of classic updos from Michael Raza, who was hairdresser to the Royals, and That's right. And then I also learned the avant-garde hairdressing from Robert, and Liz, again, my wife. This is how we met. She was in a hostel. She was training to be an optician, and there we are. This is when we came back from London, and so Liz was training to be an optician. She had this lovely long hair. She actually taught me how to braid, because I didn't know how to do long. I mean, she wasn't even a hairdresser, and she taught me how to braid. And Liz loved Liz loved sort of like that. She loved all the sort of the dressing of hair and the photo shoots, and so she trained to be a makeup artist herself. And then we left after about 4 or 5 years at Michael John. I became art director. Then I left, and and I'd started working a lot for Weller at the time. You have a fantastic relationship with Weller. And in those days, I did a tour in Australia with Weller doing some long hair work. But the time I felt was right to come back home.
There we go. No, we're back again. We're good. We're good.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's great. That's great. Actually, just as a side note there, while you're talking, Andrew, I remember when I first came to England, and I remember going to Robert Lebetta and asking Robert, could I assist him? So interesting, like you were assisting. And I remember Robert, because I mean, Robert's he lives in Robertland. He's incredible. I've got a huge respect for Robert Lebetta. And Robert said, sure, come along, be part of the photo shoot. Obviously I wasn't going to be paid. It was something I was going to do. And then all of a sudden, just before the photo shoot, something happened. I had a job, something came up, and I couldn't go. But I never forgot how generous Robert was of allowing me to be part of his world. And so it was really wonderful to hear that you had started, you were part of his world as well. So there was a lovely parallel there.
Yeah, it is incredible, isn't it? How it's I think if there's a common theme coming through, it's having the opportunity to learn from these iconic hairdressers, but then have the opportunity to appear. It was all the start, wasn't it? Then of things like Salon International, the big shows by Rembo.
Well, and this is where we come to, because this is where I first saw you, on the Tresemme stand. I remember, yes. and I just remember that beautiful choreography that your models did. And again, Andrew, and I will say this again, you worked doing hair while the models were moving, which was something that I then became that hairdresser that did that. But what I loved, Andrew, was your models had simplicity. There was a fluidness to them. I think they were all dressed the same. It was almost like this incredible pop video when the girls came out looking incredible. And I think it left such an impression on me. So who put those shows together? Was it your concept?
Well, the very, very first shows I worked with Tresemme, as I say, that was when the opportunity came, which was Indola, was known as Indola in Europe, and Tresemme in the UK. This was when Tresemme was very much a professional hair brand then. And I worked on those shows, and then one of the models on the show was Mike Issa.
Mike, brilliant choreographer.
And Mike and I have worked together ever since then. Yeah. But I think, Mike has set some most fantastic shows. But I think one of the things with these shows is that they had to be turned around about 4 or 5 times a day.
That's right. That's right. The hair had to come down and go back up again.
So you really had to. I mean, the models, the most important. You had to have fantastic models, but also so you could. So this is one of the looks. It was probably a few years after the shows we're talking about, but this is a very, very simple hairstyle. This was part of my collection when I won Hairdresser of the Year in '93, and the photographer was a chap called, world famous photographer called John Swannell, and I sort of bullied John into doing a shoot for me, because I realised at the time, and I felt very fortunate to be nominated for British Hairdresser of the Year, but it was really being dominated by the likes of Trevor and Anthony Muscola, and
that's right. That's right.
So I felt, so John worked in black and white, and this was, but you've got to hand it to, I did surround myself with very talented people.
I love John's work. I've seen John's work many, many times over the years. I've worked with him over the years. But just going back again to Salon International. Sorry, yes. Randy, I know you're pulling these photos up, but I'm just trying to keep Andrew on one subject at the moment, because this was such a formative time for you, Andrew. This was you presenting yourself to the industry on this stage, and everybody came to Salon International. That was the time when everybody from around the United Kingdom came to Salon International, and I think this was your time to really present yourself to the industry.
Well, I think it was, and I had this knack of being able to put hair.
He's going to come.
I put hair up very quickly, and I could put it up with a pin or 1 pin or 2 pins, which I can still do. But I think the audience loved it. They hadn't really seen anything really like hair going up so quick. And so there was a certain show element. So, they might not have been the most exotic hairstyles, but they were quick. And I think people felt, I mean, there was a certain, people felt, well, I could relate to that. That's something I could do myself. So the shows came round, and because the hair was going up very simply, it came down very simply, which meant it could go back up very simply 3 hours later, or 2 hours later. It wasn't very heavily done with, there wasn't a lot of, there was no gel in the hair, there was no real hairspray in the hair. It was all very well prepped. And as you know, the key to dressing hair is to get it well prepped before you start.
Absolutely. I mean, and so, this was back, I mean, what was this, Andrew? This was back in the 90s?
This was about this would be about 1989.
1989. That would be right. 1989,
88, 89, because I just got involved with doing these tresemme shows. And we did, a great chap called Jeff Wilsmer organised it. And we literally, the audience stood, as you know. I mean, they were like, and you know, the models came up the back. But I've always liked the idea of keeping things quite simple and quite classic. I watched a show at the Alternative Hair Show once. It was done by Christopher Dove. And I always remember the models came up and they did a dance routine, very much dressed similar, all doing a very similar choreography. And the Rusks were very good. I saw Urban and Rita.
Urban and Rita were amazing. Their shows were always dynamic, but again, with a simple theme.
Yeah, they had Rita. They brought these 6 models out. Some guys, some girls, they all have cropped hair and they were all bleached. They were all identical. And they all
you know, Andrew, it's interesting because when I started doing shows and I started looking at doing shows, and you'll relate to this, I mean, shows were always 15, 20, 30 models. And I can remember making a stand and saying, you know what, I only want 8 models or I only want 10 models, but I want 8 of the best or 10 of the best. And I can remember countries saying to me, Patrick, that's impossible. You've got to have 30 models. And I'm going, no, I want 8 or 10, but I want the best models, and I'm going to give you a show that I promise you your audience are going to love. And you were exactly the same.
Well, I think it's having a confidence to do that. And I think I think you've got to stick to your strengths. And if you feel you've got a good formula, you stay with it. Because as you say, if you put too many shows and too many scenes, it all gets a little bit confusing. And I think, particularly if you're only doing a 20-minute segment, say, or a half-hour segment.
So, Andrew, if you could give a piece of advice to our viewers, if they were going to put on a show, what's a simple piece of advice you would give them?
Right. Well, I think models. I think you know. I think there has to be a. I think it's great music. It's the music. I mean, obviously the hairdressing. The hairdressing has got to be right as well. But I think it's keeping that very. It's going back to that simple thing. So keeping the models all of a similar height. And because then you don't have to necessarily have particular. You know, it's not, as you know, it's not easy always to get. You know, the tallest model. If you look at the great Harry show, I love watching Karita. The Karita shows. I mean,
they're incredible.
They were incredible, and I don't know, their model's like 6'3", and then they're in heels. So you know, but as long as your models are of a similar height, and there's a sort of theme running through it, I think that's it. I think it's you don't try and do the history of hairdressing in one show. You stick to something.
Stick to your theme.
And like you do with your collections, you pick a collection, and that is your theme for the season.
Yeah, I think so. Now, listen, you touched on, you met Liz, of course, you fell in love with Liz, but you were to move on to become a powerhouse. I mean, the two of you, yes, I never knew that Liz started off as an optometrist or, you know, working with eyes and so on, but honestly, she is one of the most creative people. She has been your muse, I know, over the years. But Andrew, how blessed are you to have met someone like Liz that could take your career to the next level?
Well, yeah, I think there is the usual thing. You need a team. If you've got a loyal, strong person, and you work very well as a team. And you're very fortunate with that. With Randy and with Liz, and you've got Pat and Anthony. And I'm not saying you've got to have a team, but I think if you've got that, it gives that sort of longevity. And I think we worked. Liz trained to be an excellent makeup artist, and from that, I suppose our big break was the picture we just saw before. We moved back to Liverpool from London. We'd started a family, and it was about the same time. But I do honestly think you have to sort of make your luck, because when the TV show this morning, which is now in its
well, actually, we're going to touch on that, Andrew. But before we do that, Randy, can we have a few more pictures of some of Andrew's beautiful work? Let's just have another little quick look before we go to that subject.
Okay. So this was so this again is another John Snell shoot, and I did this one because just to show the simplicity of this. This was just a ponytail, and the hair is split into two sections, and one section I made hollow to create like a circle, and the other section I made smooth, and I just looped them around each other, and then the two ends of the hair is just some wax. A very seldom used pieces. Most of it is always the models, like like yourself, you're working with the hair.
With the hair, yeah.
And I think I sometimes think also, sometimes there's a lot going on in my life. So, we got the salons to run, we got the schools to run. And so, I've got these ideas in my head, but I'll practice and all the rest. But again, going through, if I'm doing a photo shoot, I again don't want to overcomplicate it. So that was just a particular shot. But again, fantastic models. And I would always say this: if you're entering a photographic competition or all the rest, the money has to go on the models. This was a shot of we did. It was when I first launched a product range. I had a product range back in the 90s called Andrew Collinge Salon Solutions, and it was sold in. I tell you where it really did well was in New Zealand. We did it was in there was Coles in Australia, and I'm trying to think of the supermarket. Was it Newtown or?
I'm not sure.
No, in New Zealand there was a group in New Zealand. Anyway, that's by the by. But this was for my product range collection, and this was a hairstyle that I did. Now this shows. This was 1997. So this hairstyle is getting on for 25 years old.
And yet it could be today.
But it was, I'll name drop here. Charles Worthington said to me, if I got £1 for every time someone brought that picture in, which was very kind that he said it. But it got a lot of publicity, that picture at the time. It was our advertising campaign.
Yeah, I remember the picture, and I love Charles, so that's brilliant. He said that. That's brilliant.
And it was very gracious that he said that himself. But it was very wearable hair. It was very popular.
Yeah.
It sold a lot of product. It needed a cut.
So it did what it did. And as we said from the very beginning of this interview, that beautiful sort of commercialness that you put to hair is always about femininity and softness. Yeah. Randy, let's now see. I love this one. Now this is I think it's very avant-garde. But tell us a little bit about this one.
Well, I did this hair. So I got invited by L'Oreal. Actually, I did the hair for the final of the L'Oreal Colour Trophy back in 2008. It was, I think, and we used a designer in Liverpool called Kirsty. Excuse me, Kirsty. Apologise. Kirsty. Yeah.
Don't worry.
No, not Kirsty. Anyway,
but I think Andrew. What I love about this hairstyle is I just love the balance. You've got the hair curling out. You've got a piece coming on top. I mean, again, it's that simplicity. It's crimped. This hairstyle has been crimped. I've got to give credit. Jane Littler, who's one of our managers one of our key stylists and managers in our Castle Street salon. She worked with me on this shoot, and if you can go in very close, the hair was put into a ponytail into two ponytails, but it was crimped. But it took about 4 hours to crimp. And when you took the crimping out, you then had to go through a tail comb, and then you used like a spray, like a shine spray. Yeah.
You got a tail comb, and you just combed the section. So the preparation was everything, and then you brushed it, and eventually you ended up with this most malleable hair that you could really, you literally with your hand, you could just turn it. So by the time I went on stage to do the hairstyle, although this was a presented model, but I went and did this. So the hair was split into two. One section, you can see the top section there, that created the curve, and that went round the back. and then the other section came around it. And anyway,
it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, Andrew. I'm going to leave that there for the moment, because I do want to talk about something that you and Liz were instrumental on. And this was really interesting, because I think you two, if I'm right, if I've got this right, I think you did 8 years on This Morning. You did over 500 makeovers, and I think you were dubbed the king and queen of makeovers. So much so, it took you to Harrods.
Well, it was the early days of what you'd call reality television. Television up to that point didn't really have the public on it. It was all, and then This Morning came along, and This Morning's brief was called, it had to have an educational tone. So it was very much in the early days. Monday would be finance, Tuesday would be gardening or well-being, Wednesday would be the doctor, and Friday was more lifestyle. And I went back to what I was just saying before about making your own luck. I was back in Liverpool at the time, and we were just really running the salons. I was doing a little bit of show work, a bit of hair shoots, but the Hairdresser of the Year Award started, and there were regional categories, as we know, and I entered the Northwest, what it was called Midlands then. There was only about 4 categories. There was the North, the South, and the Midlands. I think the whole thing was over by about 9 o'clock at night, the first Hairdresser of the Year Award. But I won that Northwest or Midlands, and I won it for 3 years running. Are we there still?
I'm listening. Yeah.
So it was 84,
we've still got you. We can hear you.
84, 85, 86.
Are we there?
This Morning came along.
Good.
This Morning came along. So I went into the Hairdressing Hall of Fame in 1987. Now, when This Morning started, although it was being produced in Liverpool, the production team were mainly from London, and they didn't really know anyone in Liverpool. And they phoned Hairdressers Journal and said, "Could you recommend a hairdresser? We're thinking we need a hairdresser for the show, or we're going to do a makeover or something." And Hairdressers Journal said, "Well, Andrew Collinge is in Liverpool. He's the current Northwest Hairdresser of the Year." And when I went in, I showed my work, and they said, "Well, we're going to do a makeover. We're going to need a makeup artist. Could you recommend a makeup artist?" And I said, "Well, I just happen to know a makeup artist who was Liz."
Stephen Liz.
And anyway, we did the very first show, and we only had obviously an hour to create before and after, and they chose. It was the first show, and they chose someone that worked in the office of the studio, of the production studio, and her hair was quite long, brunette. And what happened was, the night before, I coloured one side quite light, put highlights, made it blonde. But when she came on in the studio, her hair was dark and it was long. And when we went off, behind the scenes, I flipped the hair over, so suddenly half of it was blonde, and cut it into a bob. So when they did the reveal, saying, "Well, let's see what Mary looks like before the show." Well, at the start of the show, her hair was long and dark. At the end, it was in a blonde bob. And no one really asked. Well, Richard made it. It was Judy and Richard at the time.
Yeah.
Richard said, "Wow, that's amazing." He said, "That was really good." I think they realized, this was really good. And he said, "If you want a makeover, why didn't you write?" It was before emails. You had to write in. And they got over 5,000 letters, and we were like,
and of course, while you were over that 8-year season, you won British Hairdresser of the Year, I think, in 1993, and then you reprised British Hairdresser of the Year again in 1997. So I'm pretty sure I can remember you being on This Morning, winning the first British, because it was wonderful. They made a big thing of that.
Jonathan Ross came back with me. I won Hairdresser of the Year. This Morning, although Jane Lewis Orr and the previous editors are absolutely brilliant. You never know. She's the only person that knows who wins Hairdresser of the Year. But I got an inkling I might have won that night, because This Morning turned up en masse to film it, which I was thinking, this is a bit, I'm either going to be very much sitting there. I keep a smile on, having, because I've been nominated a few times. But anyway, as it happened, and then the next day, Jonathan Ross presented the award that night. He came. We flew back that morning together, and he came on the show and represented with me the award. So I remember,
Andrew. I was so happy that you'd won the award. You're right. The award has always been historically, I mean, the people that win it, of course, they deserve it and it's amazing. But you were just so left field. You came in from out and we were just, honestly, we were so proud of you that night. And
well, thank you.
And the second time you won it too. I mean, it was just wonderful.
Well, I was more surprised the second time. I was a bit, I was more surprised I won it again that night. There's some years when you think you should have won it, and others when you didn't. But no, I'm very fortunate, and I do believe that. But I think there's so much. I'm always, competitions are a great way of raising your profile. But they also, I think sometimes it is very much the adage, it's the entering that takes part. And, and I think it's very subjective, the judging. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best hairdresser that year is the hairdresser.
Totally. I mean, I've judged British Hairdresser of the Year several times, and it's completely subjective, But the great thing is, and I think this is the big thing, and a lot of people don't always realize this, there's several of us, there's a lot of us that are judging it. So it does come down to all of our opinions and the way that they aggregate all those marks. So really, by the time someone wins that, they truly have won it. It's not a political
don't get me wrong. That's not for every winner of hairdresser you've won has deserved it that year because of the work. It has been exceptional.
Yeah, it always had to be the work, and I think your work just stood out beautifully in those 2 years. Absolutely. Now, Andrew, just while you're talking about competitions, because I know really we're running out of time and we could talk forever. I know we could, but also too, you've got an academy. I know that education is a huge part of your passion as well.
Well, we trained as we got a big watch time. Yeah, this is our graduate salon. Again, this was something that was started by my parents, and then Sarah, who my sister Sarah, she was our training director for many years. And
love Sarah.
We were very fortunate. We got not fortunate through hard work. We got Ofsted outstandings and received awards for our training. Again, it was set up by my parents. My father's always believed passionately that the key is to training, and it is an issue in hairdressing at the moment. We've got to really support apprenticeship training because that is the future. That is, and the standards in training have improved. The old MVQ qualification has been just popping this one. This is our latest salon. This is in Selfridges. You said before we had a makeover studio in Harrods, which Liz and I went and did when back in the late 90s. But then about 20 years ago, we opened a salon in Selfridges in Manchester in the Trafford Centre, and we've just relocated to a new part of the store. And it's done really well. I mean, we're fortunate. It's a very challenging time at the moment, but hairdressing, it's great that hairdressing can get back. And I've got huge admiration for hairdressers because they're having to work in very challenging circumstances with the PPE and all the rest. But I think it's hairdressers are very they're not only passionate about their job. The welfare of their clients and the professionalism they show, and I think we have to maintain that because I think hairdressing is going to be all right, but it is going to be challenging. But going back, it's
going to be challenging, and again, as you said, I like you urge Andrew, all of the salons that are getting back up and running to re-look at their apprentices, to see if they can take on any apprentices, to see if any apprentices can fit into what they're doing, any government support they can get, because the apprentices are our future.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we've been trading now for 67. Well, my father founded the first salon in 1951. So that's 71. That's 70 years. 90%, 95% of our staff are homegrown. All our managers are homegrown. It makes me incredibly proud. We've got second generations working for us, and it's all come back to that key thing, and that is So yes, investing in an apprentice is a good investment because ultimately that is your succession. That is what's going to grow your business, and I think it's. And hairdressing, hairdressing has always, apprentices have always, sometimes hairdressing can get a bad rap. Sometimes, people say, if you can't do anything, you could be a hairdresser, but more fool those people that say that, because we know
we know, Andrew, it's the best career in the world. If you can fall in love with working with hair, fall in love with dealing with people, then I cannot think of a better career in the world that will give you that sense of satisfaction.
Well, and it will take you around the world, like it's.
And it will take you around the world.
And it's whatever you want it to be. You could be you can just be the busiest stylist in your salon. You could be an entrepreneur. You could be a session stylist. There are so many avenues.
As I say, Andrew, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So please, if your son or daughter wants to become a hairdresser, encourage them to become a hairdresser, because this is not an industry for wimps. This is an industry of hardworking, incredibly talented, and successful people.
Here.
Now, Andrew, before we go, I just want to quickly touch on, because I know that you have your product range as well that you've been really busy dealing with. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, we talked briefly before about a product range back in the 90s, which was, I'd say, more of a sort of mainstream in retail. This is a new project, and this is something I'm very excited about. It's called Collinge & Co. So Collinge being, the name of the company, Co being the company in the sense, the collaboration with our staff, our clients, and the future. I mean, it is a bit of a family business. When I say family, I see a lot of the people that work for us. We are a family. As I say, we work together, and I'm very proud of everyone that works for us, and those that have gone on to do great things, like Tom Connell, is ex-trained with us.
Oh, listen, you've had quite the stable of amazing hairdressers that have come from you,
and a lot of our managers, and a lot of all our staff are either in the creative team or of managers. But so this is our latest venture. But going back to the family, then my son Charlie is now our MD. He's come back. He's not a hairdresser. And I think to have a non-hairdresser for a generation.
Yeah, but he knows the industry so well.
I mean, he's navigating us through this period at the moment, which, the whole running of a business and, all the legislation and everything that's going on with keeping everything running and keeping our clients safe and keeping our staff safe. Charlie and his team are doing a great job. We have a great training team. As I say, we've Sarah stood down now, but Alison Gibson's our training director, and a lot of the training managers have all started with us from school as apprentices. But this is something that Liz and I have very much worked on, and it all sounds very family. But my daughter Ella, and
I think aren't you about to become grandparents again?
Yeah, she's due next week. Now, Ella and Guy have their own design studio, and they've come up with this, I think, fantastic concept for the packaging. The bubbles of the shampoo and the beautiful smooth lines.
It's beautiful.
Of the conditioner. So, it's very much, it's the next stage in our business. It's very much, there's going to be a lot of, obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. Hairdressing salons are going to be fine. Good quality salons.
Andrew, just while we're finishing up here, can you please give us your advice to the industry at the moment? Please, just what's your feeling just at the moment?
All right. Well, I'd say I'd try. It is a lot of uncertainty at the moment. I mean, there's a lot of, but I do feel we will get through this. I think hairdressing is a skill that you can't take away from someone. So even if it might not be as busy as you were this time last year, this will pass. We've all got to adapt, and what you're doing is fantastic. I mean, you are a performer. The stage shows haven't gone, but you channeled all your energy into your great social media and online stuff, and you deserve every success you're getting. So I think we've all got to adapt. Like our product range is now gone online, so that's a way that we can bring in another revenue. So it's adapting. It's always thinking the next stage ahead, but not changing dramatically. It's just slowly shifting with the time. It's like fashion. I always say hairstyles, they don't just change dramatically. What changes are things like textures. It's how you wear the hair. It's the texture. And I think that's what we'll do. So my advice is just to stick with it and to give something back. As I say, we've talked about before, train the next generation because hairdressing will get through this. We are, there's a lot of industries, a lot of jobs that people would be nervous with the onset of online retailing and everything else. But hairdressing is a skill that Amazon cannot sell.
No,
Yes.
no one can sell that skill. It's got to come from the individual. Andrew, as we finish off, I have to my viewers a huge list of awards that you have won. But on the back of this piece of paper, Andrew, I have written here, and I'll tell you this, a brother from a different mother. I've decided you and I are more kindred than we've ever known before. And I think you are my brother from a different mother.
Well, likewise. I think you're absolutely right. There is a lot of synergy between us. And I know
There's a lot of synergy.
And I know you have a great connection through Sue and through the Northwest as well. So we have that connection as well. So
we do. But Andrew,
yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much for putting up. We had a hiccup at the very beginning yesterday, but we've managed to get through it today. It's been an honor to have you on my show. And as the sun sets, as I can see up there, and your room is getting slowly darker and you're slowly disappearing, I think from up there in the Northwest, Andrew Collinge, thank you so much for being inspiring. And to all of my viewers out there, I hope you enjoyed Andrew. Andrew, I'm going to say good night. Thank you so much to you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, and thank you to all your viewers. And we look forward to seeing you back on stage.
Yes, and love to Liz and the family and Sarah.
Yeah. And to Randy. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So guys, we got through it. What an incredible gentleman he is. What an inspiration he is to the industry. And having hairdressed for so many years, like myself, we're still passionate. You know, it's still wonderful to see Andrew projects, products, his academy, his family coming through. And you know what, as Andrew said, you make your own luck. Life's not about something being handed to you. You make your own luck. And you know what? Luck comes with hard work. And that's what it's all about. And hard work, if we're hairdressers and we love what we do, how blessed are we to be doing things that we love? You know, I get quite emotional about that because I truly do believe that. So to all of you out there, thank you so much for watching. Tune in for another conversation with Patrick at a later date. But to all of you out there around the world, God bless and lots of love from me. Bye.